Hello and welcome back to the series we are calling The Short Film Angle. This is the series where we shine a light on some new short films and interview the filmmakers, getting insights into the filmmaking and storytelling process. My name's Alex, it's just me today. This week I'm speaking to writer, director, actor and magician Ali Cook about his new short film, The Pearl Comb. The Pearl Comb follows a fisherman's wife who captures the attention of the medical profession as the first ever person to cure someone of tuberculosis. A doctor, played by Ali Cook, is sent to investigate her miraculous claim. Determined to prove that a woman's place is in the home and not practicing medicine, he soon discovers the source of her unearthly power. This is a really great and interesting and very effects-heavy short film that was nominated for 5 awards at the British Short Film Awards, winning 2 of them, and it's just screened at an Oscar-qualifying film festival, the Cleveland International Film Festival. Like with many of these, it's not publicly available yet because it is in the middle of its festival run, but that does mean it could be playing in a town near you very soon. But when it does become publicly available, we will let you know about it. More about Ali, though. Ali is a writer, director, actor, and a magician, as I mentioned. He wrote and starred in the Channel 4 series Dirty Tricks, which was nominated for a British Comedy Award. And no doubt I will ask him all about this in the interview. So, shall we just get into it then, and welcome Ali Cook to the show. Welcome to the show, Ali Cook.
Cheers, thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
No worries, no worries. You have had quite a career so far, both in front of and behind the camera. You were an actor, or you are an actor, should I say. You are a magician, you're a writer, you're a director. So where do I start with you, Ali? What kind of was the catalyst to bringing you into the world of film and television?
Well, it's funny. Everyone always says this. You do lots of different things, but really, I think Jerry Seinfeld said this best. You're just trying to survive. That's all you're really doing. He had a great quote, which was, comedians just try and get off stage with some dignity.
Yes.
Which is, I originally, though, I was only interested in being a magician.
Okay.
I wanted to be a magician so badly when I was a kid, and I just fell in love with it, and I was obsessed with it. And then one day I heard there was a famous 19th century French magician called Robert Houdin, who was kind of like the Paul Daniels of France in his day. And he said, a magician is an actor playing the part of a magician. And then I thought, when I heard that, I was like, I better learn to act. And then I started doing acting classes. And then I didn't think much of it. And then years later, I used to be on TV doing magic shows. And the guy who was my producer was a guy called Andrew O'Connor, who famously invented Peep Show. And he invented the concept of Derren Brown, the mind reader.
Yep.
And he said to me, you should do acting. And then that's when I seriously thought, maybe I should actually, because he was a very knowledgeable producer, I thought, maybe actually he wouldn't say it if he didn't mean it. So I went out and started pursuing it properly. And then everything else is just sort of related to it. I like directing stuff because I think all actors would love to direct if they could.
Yeah.
Anyone who's been any kind of performer usually enjoys writing as well. And that's how it all happened, really.
Sure. And I guess one of your kind of next kind of bigger steps was becoming a writer. So was that quite organic? Like you mentioned, it was kind of magician to actor to thinking I can write this now. I can almost create roles for myself, maybe, essentially.
Well, yeah. I mean, with acting, you particularly when things like COVID happen and the writer strikes happen, that's immediately everyone's like, oh well, I better come up with something on my own.
Sure.
But I got into writing because years ago, I realized, so my old manager, who was Derren Brown's manager, he said, it's not about the trick, it's about the framing of the trick.
Mm.
When you watch a great magician, you don't even think you're watching a trick. That's because the writing's so good that you think you're watching this thing, and Derren Brown would be a good example of that. He is doing tricks, but people think they're watching psychological experiments. And that's the secret is in the writing. So that's where I learned that it's not the trick, it's the framing. And then I thought, well, what is framing? Well, framing is a scene and framing is a premise. And then I got into stand-up comedy, which I think is the hardest form of writing, where every joke is like a mini scene. And then I just got fascinated with the 3-act structure, the beginning, middle, and an end. And then from there, I started writing sketches. And then from there, I started writing scripts. So I'm quite a nerdy person, and I like to know how things work.
Sure.
So and so for me, I like the mechanics. I like the mechanics of a joke. I like the mechanics of a trick. I like the mechanics of a film. So I would love watching Star Wars, but then months or years later, I think, why did I like it so much? What did that filmmaker do to make me like it so much? And I like to break things down. And I don't know, my hobby is probably I just like learning stuff. That's probably it.
I remember years and years of just watching like behind the scenes of Star Wars. I was just so invested in like, how was this made? How, why do I like this? You're right. It is just kind of like, tell me everything. I need to know. And I guess in a way, maybe that's kind of where your kind of magic influences maybe influenced your filmmaking, because I guess in a way filmmaking is an illusion in itself. Would you say that was the case maybe?
I never used to think it was. I was very much just, as I said, into magic. I didn't like actors. I would as a performer, as a magician, I'd come across all these people had come out of drama school and they were so sort of musical theatre. They're like, ta-da, ta-da. And I'm like, they didn't seem real to me, but what actually happened, there was a famous card magician called Darwin Ortiz, who I'm pleased to say became a friend years later. He wrote a book called Strong Magic, which was all about the theory of magic. And a lot of his book was based on film studies. And I didn't really know this at the time until I met him years later. And he'd studied all of the Robert McKee books, etc., etc. And he'd applied a lot of film theory to magic shows. And I used to perform a lot, and I still do perform magic shows a lot. And I think that from reading his books, I learn about suspense and surprise, because I'm literally doing it live with an audience.
Yeah.
And then I think eventually from that, I intuitively kind of knew how to make, I think, at least a short film, I think.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. What pushed you then from writing into directing? Was it an ambition, or was it just, again, wanting to get more control to every aspect of kind of how a story is told and develops on screen?
Well, I made my first proper short film, The Cunning Man, and that was made on a little bit of a whim, because my friend Zoe, who is actually quite a prolific TV documentary filmmaker. She's worked in TV documentaries for years. She'd always wanted to do something on the scripted side. And she heard about a competition with Directors UK, and she's a member of Directors UK. And that year, the theme was magic. And she goes, well, you know a lot about magic. Write me a script. And it was a real pressure to write it. And we made the short together. But what I realized when we were making the film is I suddenly realized there was a lot I knew that she didn't know. And there was also a lot she knew that I didn't know. And I felt, in particular, with her being a documentary maker, not surprisingly, she knew a lot about editing and post.
Yeah.
And I felt that I knew a lot about performing and directing the actual actors. So when we made that short together, we had good combined skills. But I kind of thought, for my next short, I want to actually try and do all of the directing myself. And that's really where it came from, I think.
Yeah.
I think everyone wants to be in control of projects. I have a love-hate relationship with that, because it's great when you are in control, but suddenly your arse is on the line as well. so it's good and bad,
Yeah. I'm intrigued as well, because obviously the Cunning Man does have magic in it, but it's more mythical and folklore based, and so is the Pearl Comb, very kind of mythical and based in that. And it's interesting that your TV has been very much in comedy and magic, and yet your short films so far have been very kind of mythical. As I was saying, like, what influence this kind of distinction, or is it something that you weren't thinking about when writing these scripts?
Well, I am fascinated by all sides of magic. So a lot of magician-like trick magicians, there's a huge atheist movement in the magic trick world, because we know how easy it is to fool people. In particular, people like Darren. Darren, he knows how to fool people so easily that to him he has to be an atheist. However, the weird thing with me was my mum was a proper sort of new age hippie and was really into tarot cards. So I am aware of how easy it is to fool people, and yet I still want to believe that there's something more to the world. And so when I came to sort of trying to make scripts, I wanted to delve into mystery because I'm trying to figure it out for myself.
Yeah.
And I like to give, I think that what magic can do for people is, firstly, it's a powerful way to suspend disbelief and give people a break from everyday life. But I also think that magic at its best can give people hope. Yeah. So that's kind of why I'm into things to do with myths and magic.
Interesting. Actually, before we get into the Pearl Comb, do you want to describe for our listeners what the short film is about?
Yeah, so the Pearl Comb is my second short film, and it's a fantasy folk horror, might be the best way to describe it. And to cut a long story short, in 1893, so it's a period drama, a fisherman's wife is the first woman ever to cure someone of tuberculosis. Now, tuberculosis in those days was like the equivalent of cancer is today. It was killing everybody, and they were desperate for answers. Now, a fisherman's wife has cured someone of it, and a stuffy doctor from London has been sent to investigate her claims. Now, she makes quite unearthly claims as to how she did it, and the doctor is very, very cynical, but at some point he comes to terms with the actual terrifying powers at play that allowed her to cure people. So that might be a good way, without trying to say too much, that might be a good way.
That is a good way. That is a good way of putting it. I guess my first question would be, where did this idea come from? How, like, what inspired you to tell this story?
Well, there's quite a few things behind this. Firstly, I love folklore and I love stories. Because I like, you might call, occult magic or magic with a K, as well as magic tricks. Mm-hmm. I'm quite knowledgeable on old stories and I search them out. And I was on holiday in Cornwall, and we went on a folktale trip with a local storyteller. The guy who did the stories did all sorts of folklore stories, and some of them were about local legends about mermaids. So I found that interesting. And then simultaneously, there was a true story about the Edinburgh Seven in Scotland, who were the first 7 female doctors to qualify in Britain, but they weren't allowed to practice, even though they actually were qualified doctors. And so I then kind of meshed these legends and this true story together to create the Pearl Comb, basically. but it happened very weirdly over the period of about 9 months.
Oh, really?
So the two sort of formed together, and the longer term things about them is I used to enjoy watching Mad Men, the TV series, and what I used to love was how we would laugh at people's opinions of those days. So the Edinburgh Seven is a fascinating thing to me that, you know, in the 1800s, the concept that a woman could be a doctor was unheard of. And it's not that these people were misogynists. It was that it was unheard of.
Yeah.
So for us to see that with our knowledge now is terrifying, but also very entertaining.
Yes.
And I used to think that when I watched Mad Men, you know, on Mad Men, there'd be women smoking and they'd be like, oh, I'm 6 months pregnant. And we would go, oh my God, they literally did that in the 60s. And they did. So that was one of the things. And then the second one that drove it is that someone once said to me, oh, no one will watch English horror films. I was pitching a feature film and a quite well-known film producer said, no one watches English horror films. And I thought, well, that doesn't seem right to me.
Not at all.
And I don't believe it. And I feel like Britain is the home of creepy stories.
Definitely.
So that's one of the other things that spurs me on to think that why couldn't Britain have like the equivalent of Blumhouse in this country where we have very English horror films? I don't see why we can't do that. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense at all. I mean, we've seen American directors set their own horror films within England.
Yeah.
Folklore English horror films. I feel like quite a big thing. I'm surprised.
Yeah. I don't know how much joy you've had with pitching your own projects, but you hear every conceivable opinion from everyone. And everyone thinks they're an expert, but very few people aren't.
How did the process of kind of getting the budget for this film come about then? Did you pitch the idea before you wrote the script to your production company, or was it a case of you wrote the script and sent it around?
Well, I knew the two producers because Ross had produced my first short film, and I took it to him. And I also knew Matt Wilkinson from Stigma Films, who are a very established film and TV production company. So I'd been in some of Matt's films, and Ross had produced my short film. So I knew them. And they helped with financing and producing. And I also put my own money in. Like, there's, you know, with short films, you've got to get money from everywhere and from everyone. And, you know, the big thing with a short film is everyone gets a chance to shine, and you have to do a project where everyone gets a chance to shine.
Yeah.
So there's no way I would be able to pay the full price of the VFX.
Because it is.
But when they see that there's a mermaid in it, and they're used to doing things like painting things out and hiding rain or doing bullet wounds all day, then something like this is a great showcase for them.
Yeah.
And it's same with every department, I'd say.
Yeah. And it is a very kind of visual effects heavy film, but like, they look incredible. But before I jump onto the visual effects, I've just got to ask, as somebody who has family in Cornwall, friends in Cornwall, did you film the film in Cornwall?
We did, yeah. We shot it in Penzance.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
I did wonder.
We shot it in Penzance, and it was one of those things where the line producer knew a guy who was a locations manager, and I think they were chatting and said, oh, I know a holiday cottage and it has a private beach. What is hilarious is we're making this creepy folk horror, but we had to wait for the holiday goers to leave the cottage. Isn't that huge contrast between reality and fantasy? It's just like Mr. and Mrs. Jones leave, and now we're going to film a horror film in this cottage, you know.
Did you have any issues with the cottage itself? Obviously, the film is a period drama as well as this fantasy film. So, what was that like, trying to kind of incorporate those details into the film?
Well, the guy was called Khan, who is a locations manager, and he'd found a great place, and he knew the guys who own these holiday cottages. Fortunately, this holiday cottage was famous for being untouched, so we basically got into a old cottage with wooden floors, pretty bare ceilings. It was pretty much a blank canvas. We then did have a woman called Isabel Prillo, who was the production designer, and she pulled in a lot of favors with the prop houses that she knows to set dress it.
Yeah.
But we genuinely had a good scout, and we got a good location.
I guess then as well, on top of that, you've got the costumes, you've got anything in the background. How difficult was that to kind of figure out as you filmed, or potentially in the pre-production?
Well, with all of these things, you've got to commit yourself and then just figure it out.
Yeah.
And with the pearl comb, I have to say we were unbelievably lucky. Like, we got a cottage that was kind of right. There was a beach literally a 10-minute walk away. Like, getting all the kit down to the beach, that was a big challenge. But in terms of the costumes, because I was working with established producers like Matt, they have a big range of contacts. So we had a woman called Connie Woods who did our costumes, and she was just great. I mean, I think period dramas are quite an easy one. You go to Angels, they've got a lot of Victorian outfits. So I think if we were maybe filming, I don't know, in a much earlier time, say the 1300s, maybe that would be a lot trickier. But sure. Victorian England, I think there's a lot. My character was the plain black suit. I think there's a lot of those kicking about, and it was quite easy to source costumes for this time period, I would say.
Going into the visual effects a little bit, how difficult was that to incorporate into the film? Because there are a lot of big special effects in here, lots of water as well. Were you filming them in kind of production studios after you did the kind of primary filming at the cottage?
So the VFX really is the tricky bit on the Pearl Poem. Everything else was tough but all manageable. But the VFX was the big challenge. And the reality is there was quite a lot where no one knew what to do. And we had a lot of conversations. I would probably say maybe the one big thing that was on our side was that because the writer's strike was on, no one was working. So we probably got a lot more prep time than most people would normally get on a short, because everyone was effectively unemployed. I had a brilliant DOP who was up for chatting to the VFX people, and the company that we used were called Koala. And what they were very good at, telling us what VFX is good for and what it's not good for. And they were honest with that.
Yeah.
And I think that really helped. And a lot of it was nearly all shot on location. But the big saving grace is in Penzance, there is a Lido. So we actually shot a lot of the water scenes in the Lido, and then it's comped in to the shots in the sea. Now, a lot of people think we just shot in the sea, and we did a little bit, but not much.
Yeah.
But the big saving grace out of that is, how do you get the water to match? Well, the water matched because the Lido is actually an inlet from the sea down there.
Mm.
Now, that was the gift from the gods. Because if we were in a normal swimming pool, it wouldn't have looked as good. Or if we were in some sort of studio pool, it just wouldn't be as good, because we have natural outdoor lighting and we actually have the same color seawater. I mean, that, and that's where I feel like once you commit sometimes you get lucky, but I think you get lucky once you've committed. It's the only way I can explain it.
And then for your actors, especially the role of the mermaid in the film played by Clara Paget, obviously was it absolutely freezing? Like poor lady has to be in a mermaid costume in this Lido.
Well, I mean, the other thing with Clara is, you know, she's a model as well, and I think she's also a Pilates teacher. So I don't think she has an ounce of body fat. You know, she's a svelte, athletic person, and it's November, and she is getting in and out of the ocean or in and out of swimming pools. So
yeah,
she genuinely was frozen, and it actually added to the performance because the blueness, we didn't have to do much in the grade. You know?
yeah,
She already looks cold, and also because we were portraying a mermaid to be a little bit evil. I think the fact that she was cold and she looked a bit hungry, and she looked more like an actual creature rather than, say, a Disney mermaid.
yeah,
It all kind of just helped. I think it helped that we shot it then. But, you know, all actors know it's going to be cold. Like,
yeah.
it's part of the job. Every actor knows it's going to be cold, and every actor always carries a secret pair of thermals. But we did do a lot to. We were very aware that she was going to get cold.
Yeah.
So we, for example, we did a bit of research. We found out thermal wetsuits which were lined, so they're not your normal wetsuits. So we did, when she was lying on the rocks, we had padded stuff down so that the heat, the coldness of the rocks wouldn't get to her.
Yeah.
So we were pretty meticulous, but we were already thinking about that going in.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. I think she's absolutely brilliant in the film, and I think she's got really captivating eyes. That's what really struck me, and I think you make full use of that within the film. And I think she just, like, there's this kind of otherworldly presence around her, which really works within her role.
She's got a very, you know, classically beautiful and simultaneously a little bit scary look about her. And what was amazing, obviously, you know, we shoot some bits, and our DOP Dave, he was timing the sun. So when the scenes where she's being alluring, we made sure the sun's really hitting her face. And then in the bits where she's terrifying, we're making sure that, you know, it's overcast. So we were doing little tricks like that. But also, when her hair is down, we would take some of the makeup off, so she just doesn't look. She looks bedraggled and not as perfect. So we were doing little things like that to try and show both sides of her.
And I'm interested as well. Was the tail practical, or is it a visual effect?
So mermaid tails. The overall thing I would say is probably never attempt to do it. And I think it was too late. We were already deep into it, and then that's when we started finding out. We were looking into practical tails, VFX tails. The reality is, you need to know what your shots are. If someone's quite still, then practical's probably a better way to go. But in my film, there wasn't that much tail, and she was tending to be moving. So you want the VFX, because then you can be moving the tail.
Sure.
But really, I try to imply a lot. It feels as though you always see the tail, but you only ever see we get one shot at the start where we see the full tail. Yeah. And then after that, we're only seeing little slivers of the tail, and that was my way around it. Yeah,
I feel like you made a film full of things which people would probably stay clear of on short films. You know, water, special effects, mermaid tails, dogs, dog actors,
dogs.
You're like, chuck it all in.
Yeah, I mean,
rabbit. Yes, of course.
I can't tell you. The shoot, it was a very technical shoot. We used blue screen, green screen, black screen. This starts going into the how anal the DOP was, Dave, and getting reflections of the green and stuff like this. Also, it was very hard. What does she wear when she's swimming away?
Yeah.
Is it a green tail or is it a black tail? There were all sorts of different times we used different things there. I would have avoided it all if I didn't know any better. Unfortunately, I didn't know any better. They say that naivety is great confidence, and I was naive enough to not know any better.
Yeah, we can pull this off. It's great.
I was just like, yeah, we'll do it. And then you're like, and what happens is you go, yeah, we'll do it. And then you find out, oh, you can't do it. And then like a week later, you're like, well, actually, if we did this and we did that, we discovered the Lido about 3 weeks before shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess you had a very good team around you. I am interested in kind of that collaboration with your director of photography, because the film is quite creative with some of its shots, and obviously you mentioned it was quite a technical process. What was that collaboration like?
Dave, our DOP, he really is excellent. Like I think he's got a genuinely great photographer's eye. And so I just trust him. So I know a lot of directors are also cameramen, but I'm not. Yeah. So I'm very focused on the performance and the story. What I do is I come up with shots for the edits, like there's the slapping shot where it switches scene.
Yeah.
So I make sure we get those right. But in terms of, like the cinematic shots of the entire scene at the very start, I just completely trust Dave to do it. And having that trust in him, in a weird sort of way, I worry about the content of a shot, not the look of the shot. That's how I do it. I feel as though I need to know that in this shot there is, a phone, my face, and these nail clippers. I need to know that. But how that shot, how it's going to be framed, I'll let Dave do that.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, did you storyboard at all, or was it?
Yeah. I'm a big planner. I think it depends what you're doing, and everyone has a different thing. Because the VFX are so hard to do, we had to storyboard those. And that discipline led to the whole thing being very planned.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, if someone's carrying a mermaid like this, that's going to cost, a few £100. If they're carrying her like that, it's suddenly become £2,000. So you cannot wing it. You just cannot wing it. There's no getting around it. And if you do shoot it like that, well, you're not using it. It's like, I'm just a believer in it's easier. It's easier in the long run, the more meticulous you are.
Yeah.
That's how I feel personally. Yeah.
Was there anything, and maybe you don't want to say, but was there anything that was left on the cutting room floor because it was just too difficult a shot to pull off?
Oh, that's a good question. There were a couple of errors. We mostly chopped stuff out. I'm pleased to say that I felt like everything was usable.
Yeah,
actually, but I did chop out about 5 minutes from. Okay. Yeah, but that was literally it was literally superfluous dialogue, or just a few sort of GV shots that we didn't need. And having entered short film contests before, it helps if you're on the pacey side.
Yeah, gotcha.
And also I I think the minute a short film goes beyond 15 minutes, it's got to warrant its stay.
Sure.
In a short film lineup where they're going to be playing anywhere from 6 to 12 shorts. There were a couple of shots I missed. We did in the opening scene. There's my character talking to Betty just at a kitchen table, and we had a 2-shot there that wasn't working.
Yeah,
and I wish we'd have done another 2-shot there, just to throw into the edit. Such a simple shot, and I felt like the one we had wasn't quite right. There were a few other shots, but most of the other ones I think were pretty good, but we just didn't really need them to keep pushing the narrative.
So another thing about the film is that obviously you star in it in a role, and I'm interested to know, what is it like directing yourself in a scene? Are you getting up after every take to check the kind of look of it, or are you saying, no, I know that wasn't right, or have you got a good team around you who might say, nope, that wasn't right, try that again?
Yeah, it's a funny one, this, because you hear about people like the woman who made I May Destroy You, was she's the lead, unbelievably, and the writer and the director, and obviously like Ricky Gervais in Afterlife. I think I was nervous at first on my first day of doing my scenes, but then you realize, because you've written it and rewritten it and rewritten it, it so well, that I just trusted myself. And then my assistant Amy, who's one of the associate producers, she'd helped me trim the script, that she knew it so well. So when it came to my scenes, she would watch my performances. So I just trusted Amy. But at first I was checking back my performances, but then I think that makes you too self-conscious. I think you're better to, do a few takes, and then when Amy goes, yep, you've got it, trust her and move on. Yeah. And I think if you've got more than 2 takes and your material, you're going to make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine as well, being an actor and directing, for the other actors on set as well, there must be a level of comfortability to know that, you are looking out for the performance and how to direct an actor, essentially. So I know you've worked with some of the cast before, but I'm interested as well, like, how did you find, how did you go about casting for the other parts in the film?
So there's for people who haven't seen it yet, there are 4 main characters. So there's myself, I play the doctor who's investigating. He's called Gregory. There's the lead, played by Beatty Edney, and she's called Betty. She's a fisherman's wife. There's the mermaid, played by Clara, and then there's the husband of the fisherman's wife, which is Looty, played by Simon Armstrong. And Simon was the lead in my previous short.
Yep.
In my previous short, he played a Welsh farmer, so it wasn't a massive leap to make him a Cornish fisherman.
Good with accents.
Well, he's great with accents, but I just love Simon as an actor.
Yeah.
I think he's an exceptionally talented man. My 2 favorite actors are Willem Dafoe and Simon Armstrong. I can't afford Willem Dafoe yet, but when I can, he's going to act alongside Simon Armstrong. And so with Simon, I knew he's perfect for that role, and I absolutely trust him. Beatty, who played Betty, I hadn't worked with before, but she'd been in Poldark for years on the BBC. So she was like, she's not doing a dissimilar role that she did on a primetime TV drama. So we know the accent's down. She's a very experienced actress.
Yeah.
It was a direct offer. The hard bit was finding a mermaid. That was really tricky. And I used a casting director's young assistant to help out. And she cast it for me. and she did a great job. But it was hard finding someone to play the mermaid. We had to cast the net quite far to try and find someone. And at one point, I didn't think we were going to find anyone. It really was one of those times where it's like, you're not quite sure what the look is, but they've got to have a certain look for it to work, I think.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. I know what you mean. But I think you found the right person there. I'm interested in your kind of approach to writing short films. One of the tasks I've set myself this year is to get back into writing more. So I used to do a lot more writing following my film degree, and then I kind of fell off as kind of work became more of a thing within my life. So one of the things I want to do this year is write a short film. But I've always struggled with short films in terms of like containing that idea within a short frame of time. And a lot of films feel sometimes like they are just scenes of a larger thing, a scene from a feature film. And that's not what I want to do, even though those do work sometimes. But I did find that your film was very good at living within that 3-act structure, which you've mentioned before. It has a definitive kind of beginning, middle, and end. And I'm wondering, how'd you do that? Did you come up with the ending first and then write backwards? How'd you go about approaching that?
Some of this comes down to being a magician. That with a magic trick, you get the trick up and running, and then you spend the rest of your life refining. And the hard bit is the initial idea, and that's really where the talent is actually why do people get the actual screenplay credit is because coming up with the Wizard of Oz is bloody hard. That's the hard bit. And then after that, you can just spend ages improving it. And it's not easy. And I'm going through the same at the moment. I'm sort of thinking, Jesus, I've made the Pearl Comb. Why am I writing again? And it's because it's just not easy. Like, there's no two ways about it. But I always feel that the main problem with shorts is they don't have an ending. And I think the main way to have a good short is to get to a good ending. If, you might say, in magic, they always say, finish on your best trick. Open with your second best trick, close with your best. And I do feel that if you have in your mind, we've got to go out with a bang, that you will find it. You will. And I didn't have that ending for quite some time. I'd written it quite badly, and I had elements of, the myths and the Edinburgh 7 all in there, but I didn't really have much of an ending. And then when I came up with the big surprise ending, it just sort of fell into my mind. But I do think that you have to push yourself and not edit yourself to get something. And then just trust yourself that if I do an hour a day, and if you can't do that, you just 20 minutes a day, every day, and then you won't do that. You'll probably do it 3 times a week. But you will get something. You will get something. And then what I do is I do get a script editor. So I do pay a script editor, and I think that's money well spent. I will. There are all sorts of script editors around, and if for anything, half the battle is: are they confused? Are they not confused? Is this bit dragging? Isn't it? Like, and I do think, and I do think that you want to use one. Once you've got to that point where you think, I think this is as good as I can do it, get a script editor, and then just don't get defensive. Just listen to the notes, let it percolate, and then decide which bits you'll change. I hope this is making sense.
It is. It's really good advice. I'm interested then. So you were physically in writing the first draft of the script without an ending potentially in mind then, and that came to you in the writing process. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just aware to myself. When I made The Cunning Man, it was part of a competition, and when I watched the other films, I felt like a lot of them didn't have an end. And I do feel that you're better with a simple idea completely resolved rather than having lots of ideas that have to be resolved. Yeah. Now, the Pearl Comb is a big challenge because there is quite a bit going on. But I only really wrote the Pearl Comb because I'd already pulled off a short where I think had a simple idea. So my first short was an old farmer is collecting dead animals. Why? And at the end, the question is answered. So you really want to try and get it down to that one thing, you know. A man has left the hotel and he's got blood on his hands. Why? In 10 minutes' time, you'll know why. It doesn't need to be much more than that.
But that question itself is enough to hook somebody in, and I guess that's where it comes from.
Yeah, but this is a structure, you might say, for a mystery or a thriller or a horror, say. Not necessarily the same for a drama, but that's how I tend to do it.
Yeah.
In comedy, I really used to struggle with how to come up with jokes. And a guy would say to me, write a statement and then write all the assumptions with that statement. And then by the end of that film, you've shattered one of those assumptions, you know, and that's where you get your turn or your surprise. And I tried to do that with a short film. And one of my other routes to it is another comedy friend of mine said to me, how do you come up with a new idea for a joke? And he said, kill the sacred cow, which he got from a book called A Whack in the Side of the Head, which was a famous book in the 80s on creativity. And one of the routes in my script was I wanted to do a mermaid film, but the mermaid is terrifying. So that's how I kill the sacred cow. When I watch a mermaid, it's normally like, you know, a beautiful Disney princess, and she's in love with the prince, and she's beautiful, and she's sweet, and she sings songs. But how about, like, it's a vampire, and she's fucking evil?
Yeah, right. Terrifying.
Or, you know, just take that idea. What happens if it's a werewolf, but he's lonely? Or what happens if it's what happens if it's a vampire, but she's in debt? You know, like... So you immediately just add something that no one has done with that famous thing.
Yes.
And that leads to an amusing, that can lead to a good premise, but it's not a plot.
Yeah.
But it's enough to get you going, I think.
Yeah, enough to ignite that spark
or a spark, you know, what happens if it's a zombie that feels guilty each time he creates another zombie? Like, these are all off the top of my head now, but
don't give them away for free.
Well, I'm just thinking of, you know, what's an assumption about a zombie and how would you undercut it?
Yeah.
You know, there's that show What We Do in the Shadows, which was all about that. You know, it was a vampire on the day off, you know. Now, obviously, this technique is bound to lead to comedy, but it doesn't always have to. But it's certainly one of the ones I use, I think.
You've mentioned, obviously, taking your previous short film, The Cunning Man, into short film festivals, and obviously now you're in that process again.
Yeah.
What have you learned from that process? The Cunning Man did very well, and what are you applying here when kind of showing the Pearl Comb to the world?
Well, it's at that stage now where it's, you know, it's out in the open. I work with a woman called Rebecca, and she has a company called the Film Festival Doctor.
Okay.
And you pay her a fee, and she helps you come up with the festivals that she thinks will work well for the film that you've got. Now, it's not an exact science, but I think it's well worth working with someone like her if you can. And so I think that's certainly part of the process. And I think another part of the process is you've just got to put it out there. And it is a bit like asking someone out on a date. You don't really know who's going to say yes. You don't really know who's going to say no. You just have to sort of go for it. And all of these things all happen at all sorts of different levels. And I think everyone tries to put values and what does certain people like and don't like. And I think those things are all changing all the time as well.
Yeah.
So I think probably the main thing I would say is whatever budget you have, you should be budgeting for the marketing of the film to festivals.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the most obvious thing no one ever thinks about.
The life afterwards.
The life afterwards. You need a bit of cash to get it out there. And is it pay to play? Yes, it is. You've got to pay a fee to get in there. Now, if you start winning a few, people might take those fees away or give you reductions, but you just have to, that is part of the climate that's going to happen. I think another one that I've noticed, having been in a lot of short films, is, I'm sure you've heard this one as well before, is a lot of people forget about the sound. And I've been in a lot of films where they immediately look studenty because the sound mix isn't great.
Yeah.
And I would spend as much as you can getting your sound right. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that was one of the first things I was taught in film school, is just like your films are going to look like student films if you don't get that sound right. And I think that was one of the big things. It was like sound and lighting, because we had all seen films. We all knew what a good shot looked like. And a lot of us, could tell a story. But it's all those other elements that make something feel amateurish if you're not careful.
Well, I think there's a few things. I think probably these are my off the top of my head. I would say number one, definitely sound. Number two, I feel as though most people usually do shoot stuff pretty well nowadays. That's a lot of people are pretty handy with a camera. Even a phone, it can look pretty good. So I don't worry so much about that. But after that, I would think about the clarity of the plot. So for me, I would go sound and then the clarity of the plot.
Yeah.
In a magic trick, people always used to say to me, is it hard fooling people? And I would say, no, it's very hard for people to understand what the trick is.
Yeah.
And it's the same in a movie, like, in Star Wars, he's got to blow up the Death Star before the baddies take over the universe. Like, it really is that simple. It becomes infinitely complex, but at some point they made it that simple. And I bet it wasn't that originally. I bet there was loads of stuff going on.
Oh, yeah.
But they made it that simple. And I think it's asking one clear question and having the answer by the end.
Yeah, gotcha. So when this episode comes out, I believe it's just after your film has been shown at the Cleveland International Film Festival, which is an Oscar qualifying film festival. So for our listeners, what does that mean for your film's journey? And I guess as well, like, what are your aspirations for the film going forward? Is that something you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I will, I put so much work into it that I keep, I always say I'm going to pimp out the film as much as I can. I mean, it's like, it's like the next job, and it's probably as much work. So I will try and get it. We are BIFA qualified now.
Yeah.
And I will try and, I think we're close to being BAFTA qualified. We'll try and get Oscar qualified. And we just keep going for it. But I also know that there's just you just have no idea on any of this stuff. And people try and make all sorts of predictions, but One thing I love about shorts is you really can do anything. You really can. And I came back we had our premiere at Tampere in Finland, which is a big short film festival. And some of the stuff was crazy, and some of it was just crazy and brilliant. And, one of the big award winners there was an absolutely out there film, but I don't know why you were just compelled to watch it.
Yeah.
So I feel like my aspiration is to win as much as I can and have as many people see it as much as I can. And hopefully, I think the overall thing is I just want people to trust me that I could make a feature. I think that's the overall objective.
Well, that's probably a good place to ask you then. What is this feature film you're working on, or is it something you're pitching? Where are you in that process right now?
So I am pitching another folk horror, which I wrote before I wrote my first short film. But I soon found out that it's quite hard pitching people movies when you don't have any credits.
Yeah.
Even though I had credits as an actor, I didn't have any credits as a filmmaker. I mean, again, I think we all think it's really quite simple. You're just trying to prove competence to people at all times. And the only way of really doing that is by actually doing it and then showing people stuff. There's no real other way than doing that. And it always comes down to that, basically. So I am still pitching this film, and it's not easy.
No.
And I have ideas for other features as well. I've come up with some other shorts that are sitting in my mind, which I need to write. I've written one of them. So I'm working on 3 shorts and the feature at the moment.
Busy. But it's good. It's good to be creative and keep working that way, isn't it?
Yeah, a few years ago, I saw Darren Litton, who wrote the ITV sitcom Benidorm. And he said, just get it down on paper. And I'm sure you've heard other people say that. And he would say, try and burn, he called it burn drafting. Just try and do a draft of whatever it is the thing is. That is the hard bit. And then from there, you can try and craft stuff. And that's what I've done a burn draft of one. And I've just thought of another short in the last couple of days. And it's loosely based on my daughter. And I feel like I'm going to burn draft that one now.
It's a good idea. I remember those kind of early days of trying to make it into the writing world. It was very much like if somebody likes your script, make sure you have like at least 3 more ready to go. It's always good to have those things ready, or at least, ideas ready to go.
I remember once I had a friend of mine who got me a meeting with a literary agent, and I didn't really have a script. And about 4 years later, I'm like, man, I wish I was having that meeting now.
Yeah.
So you tend to learn all of these things the wrong way around, really.
Definitely. At least you can, take those words of wisdom now and pass them on.
Yeah, I don't know if you've read any of Stephen Pressfield, any of his stuff.
Not sure if I have.
He wrote the book The War of Art, and he famously wrote the film The Legend of Bagger Vance, which won the Oscar for Best Screenplay, which is a film about golf. And I think he wrote a book about writing about he never in his wildest dreams thought anyone would want to watch a film about golf. And it's like the best thing he's ever done. And it was his hobby, he wrote about it and it was his hobby. But I do think that you just got to write it, yeah.
So we asked this question to all our guests because on the podcast we have a series where we work through our blind spots on the Sight and Sound greatest films of all time list, and then through doing this, we've seen that a lot of films that are favorites of filmmakers and critics, and you get to see how these films have influenced the films that you are watching modern day. So that always interested me and made me wonder, like, what are some of your favorite films, or maybe not even your favorite films, but films that have inspired your way of filmmaking and inspired the kind of stories that you want to tell?
That's a great question. So what films, not necessarily my favorite films, but they've inspired the way I want to tell stories?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
They could be your favorite films.
I think that my favorite films aren't necessarily the films I want to make. One of my favorite films is The Empire Strikes Back. I thought that was a technically perfect film. So that made me feel that whatever you make should be technically perfect as a given.
Interesting.
So I feel a bit like if I go to a clothes shop, this is how brutal life is. If I go to a clothes shop, I try on a jacket and I'll go, oh, I like it, or oh, I don't like it. But I expect it to be properly made.
Yeah.
So I feel like a film has to be properly made no matter what, which means that's a ton of really hard work. And even then, someone might just go, oh, I don't like it, the way they don't like a jacket. So I have that thought. So I have that say from Empire Strikes Back. I thought everything about it was perfect.
Yeah.
But a film that really affected me would be The Last Temptation of Christ.
Okay.
By Martin Scorsese. And I know a lot of people don't mention this film. I watched that film on TV on Channel 4 at Christmas years ago when they were putting, very thought-provoking films on around Christmas. It really knocked me for six. And the premise is, does this man really believe he's the Son of God? And he was struggling with doubt. And I think that what blew me away was watching someone's thinking.
Yeah.
And I came to the conclusion that someone's thinking is entertainment. And we buy into, not when they're chatting, but when they turn away and they start thinking about what they're going to say next. When an audience starts being bothered about that, that's when you're doing it right. And I felt that when I watched The Last Temptation of Christ, I'm not thinking I'm watching Willem Dafoe. I'm thinking, oh my God, this guy, he's thinking, am I mad or am I Jesus? Like, and that I think that film really affected me that way.
It's such a great film, isn't it? Like I think of like Scorsese's own kind of meditation on his own religion, on Catholicism, and how that plays into that film as well. It is just so well done.
And I think one of the other things maybe for me is there something else? Obviously that's a film about religion and Jesus and his own doubts and beliefs. So I feel as though so in The Pearl Comb, there's a line, magic and medicine make a marvelous combination.
Mm.
And I feel as though that's something I'm grappling with quite a bit. So I quite like films that tap into things like that. But I also like films that tap into sadness quite a lot. And it doesn't always have to be like a heartfelt drama. This is how my mind works. In the first series of The Mandalorian hates robots. But by the end of the first series, a robot has selflessly sacrificed himself to save the Mandalorian. And it made me feel sad for the robot.
Yeah. So
that affects me. But at the same time, on the other end of the scale, I remember watching the film Shame with Michael Fassbender, and he's incapable of feeling close to people. And that really affected me. And that's, one's like a family sci-fi and one's like really arty drama. But I think it's those things that really get to me. So those might be, 4 very eclectic programs there, but they really get me.
No, that's really interesting. Really interesting. And yeah, we can tell you're a Star Wars nerd. You're in safe company. Thank you, Ali, for joining us on the podcast today. Really appreciate your insights into kind of the short filmmaking process. And when The Pearl Comb is publicly available, we'll make sure to get it out to our listeners. It is a really, really, really good film. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Good. Thanks very much, Alex. Cheers.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Ali there. He's got a really interesting trajectory within the world of film and television, and I just found it very insightful as to how all these different projects that he's been involved with have gotten off the ground. It was also nice to get a little bit more into the writing element behind these films. As mentioned in the interview, it's something I want to do more of, potentially with and surrounding the podcast, so a little tease for potentially what's to come there. We always ask the same question at the end of our interviews about the films that inspired the filmmakers we have on the show. I have started documenting those answers in the form of a letterbox list, so go check that out. My letterbox profile is in the show notes, so go check it out there. But that has been the episode for this week. If you've enjoyed it, make sure to leave us a 5-star rating or review. We do really appreciate it. And if you'd like to keep up to date with us, make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at The Film Angle. We also have a Film Angle playlist, and if you want to listen to what we listen to, you can find that in the show notes. Be sure to catch us next week for more cinematic discussions. Goodbye.